And welcome back to my photography masterclass. My name is Terry White, Worldwide Design and Photography Evangelist. It's my pleasure to be back. It's been a few weeks streaming live here on Fridays for photographers and all things photography. So, as you probably were aware, last week Adobe does an annual shutdown around the 4th of July, so we were out last week. That's why none of us did master classes, and unfortunately, the week before, Thursday night, or really Friday morning around 1 o'clock in the morning, I went to the ER. I went to the emergency room. I was not feeling my best, let's put it that way. I felt like dizzy, ready to faint. Luckily, it ended up not being COVID, so and I'm back and I'm feeling great again. So they took care of me there, and I was in for a couple of days. So that happened early Friday morning. So that's why my last one was canceled, or not really canceled, but rescheduled to today. So with that said, we're going to dive right in and take a look at actually something that I was planning 2 weeks ago, because the week prior to that, we rolled out all the June updates for the photography program. So we rolled out updates to Photoshop, Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, and a brand new app for your iOS and Android devices called Photoshop Camera. So with all of that, I did a quick update that Tuesday when it rolled out, and I was joined with our Chief Product Officer, Scott Belsky, but I only had about 7, maybe 8 minutes of demo time after Scott talked. Before we went on to the next person. So today, I'm actually going to get a chance to go deeper into all of those things and just kind of show a couple of things that I showed or I guess that's 3 weeks ago now. And some of you probably know some of this stuff, especially if you've been keeping up with the photography tools. But I think I'm probably going to at least show you a couple things maybe you haven't discovered yet, or hopefully you haven't discovered yet, and you get to learn them today. And thanks for all the good wishes. Yes, I'm totally back to feeling myself again, and great to be here. All right, so and very happy that it wasn't COVID. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Let me switch over to my desktop so we can take a look. I've got my outline here, and we're just going to go through them step by step, and again, take that deeper look that I wanted to do but didn't get a chance to a couple of weeks ago. All right, now what I have in front of me today is actually Lightroom, but we're not going to start in Lightroom. We're actually going to start in Photoshop. As a matter of fact, I'm going to start all the way over in what I now call old Photoshop, the previous version. And with the previous version, we're going to do a couple of things that I just want to show off. One of the things that really makes a huge difference in what got updated in the 2020 version. So I'm going to open up, first of all, I'm going to open up an image. And this image has issues. Obviously, the buildings are kind of leaning in. I'm going to fix that later. But let's go ahead and take a look at one of the images that maybe I want to put on top of this. So I'm just going to drag over a portrait. This is actually not one of my photos. This is one from Adobe Stock. And actually, this is not a great example. Let me actually escape out of that because the top of her head's kind of cut off. So let me use the one I used last time. All right, and the top of her head's kind of cut off on this one too, but it's okay. All right, so now that I got this one in place, if you were to cut her out of that original brick background, you might start with either quick select or a select subject, and then go into select and mask and finish the job. Well, the problem with select subject till 3 weeks ago is that it was never trained for people, or especially people with hair. It's basically trained for what it thinks is the subject of the photo. So if I go ahead and choose select subject in the 2019 version, it will do what it thinks it thinks the subject is. So it thinks the subject is her, great. And it even thinks part of the wall is her down here in the lower left corner, but that's okay. But mainly the problem is the hair. So if I were to go now into select and mask, and we were to look at the mask, you get this hard edge. You would now have to go in with the refine edge tool. You'd have to start using all the sliders. You'd have to use decontaminate colors. You'd have to do all the things necessary to bring the hair back. Because 100% of the time, select subject was never going to get hair back in the 2019 or earlier 2020 version because it was just never designed to. So you would always have to go in and fix the hair every single time, unless the person didn't have hair or unless the hair was really slick and not, sticking out. Other than that, other than those smooth examples, you would always have to go fix it. So this is the mask we would get in the earlier 2020 version or last year's version. All right, so I'm going to cancel this because, or let's say I click OK. Let's go ahead and add it. This is the problem, is that it just does not know, like that's all the brick background that was there before. So you would have to go fix all that, and that was the problem. Well, we don't want to do that anymore. So I'm going to switch over now to the 2020 update, the newest update that happened in June, and we're going to open up those same exact photos. First of all, let's open up this Manhattan Bridge. I took a photo like this, even though this one isn't mine. And the problem with taking photos like this when you're at the ground level looking up at buildings is that you get this effect with your lens of the buildings looking like they're caved in. So let's fix that first. Let's go into my filter menu. Let's go to convert for smart filters just so we can make it non-destructive. And then let's go into camera raw filter. And this is another thing that has happened. In the camera raw filter, it's totally different now. As a matter of fact, I have to sometimes remember where things are because you'll notice that all the tools that were at the top in Camera Raw have been moved over to the right-hand side. All of the panels are now like they're like basically like Lightroom. They're all in one column. And you just flip them down for what you want. So geometry is exactly what I want, and that's exactly where I would go get it in Lightroom. So is the goal to make Camera Raw Lightroom? No, because Camera Raw and Lightroom's edit and develop modules were always the same anyway. It's just to make the look and feel the same so that if you're working in one or the other, you know where things are. So instead of me, oh, it's in Camera Raw, let me see, it's in this icon over here on the right, and then it's a separate thing down here versus in Lightroom, it's a panel down the side. So just basically making Camera Raw and Lightroom look the same so that when a photographer is going back and forth, they know where things are. All right, I'm seeing a bunch of people pop in over on Facebook, and I'm seeing a bunch of people on Twitter, and thanks for all the love in both places. But if you really want to participate in the discussion, head over to b.net/Adobe Live. That's where I'm really going to pay attention to the chat. But I see you, Tammy, Gustavo, Anitra, Don. I saw one of my cousins in there earlier, Stefan. Just great to see you guys all here. But head over to b.net/Adobe Live, and that's where if you want to chat, if you want to just hang out and watch, you can hang out and watch. But people over on YouTube, I see you guys over there as well. But this is the chat that I'm going to be paying attention to. All right. So with that said, let's fix the buildings. So in geometry, I could just simply hit auto and just see what that does. And that did what I wanted. It basically straightened things up. So this is what we had before. Again, this is what you would typically get out of the camera, but this is what we would really want. We want things to look like they're standing straight up and down and not caving in on each other. Okay, now that we got that, let's go back to our original issue, which we're going to go ahead and bring her over again. And even though this is not the subject that I'm ultimately going to put here, I just want to show you the difference so you see a side-by-side comparison of what the old version of Photoshop did versus the new one. And then we'll use the actual photo that I want to put here. All right, so let's go up to the select menu once again. Let's come down to select subject once again. And I can already see the difference in the mask. I didn't do anything extra, didn't set up anything extra. It's just now, it's what we call portrait select subject. In other words, select subject now knows what people are with hair. That's the big difference. Before, it knew what a subject was, it knew what the person was, but it did not know how to pay attention to hair. Now, so before we even go into select and mask, previous select subject with people with hair, you would get 0% chance that it's going to get the hair, unless the hair was very smooth or slick or non-existent. Current version means you're going to get anywhere from 80% to 100% of the way there. So in some cases, you're done. You don't have to do anything else. In other cases, you still may need to use the Refine Edge tool, or you still may need to use the decontaminate colors, especially if there's a lot of color from the background reflected into the hair or onto the subject. You'll still need to use those tools. But where you are now compared to where you were last version is monumental. It's like I would always have to do work in the previous version, whereas this one, I might be able to get away with one click. All right, Sensei is always learning. That's right. So now if I were to go to select and mask, and we were to look at that mask, look at that. Look at how it knows what hair is now. And again, I didn't do anything extra, didn't do anything, and I still have the ability, if it missed things, to go into Refine Edge. If I still want to use decontaminate colors, I still can, but I'm just not even going to mess with anything just to show the difference and click OK. And now if we were to go in and zoom in, we can see the difference is that it got rid of a lot of that brick wall that was behind her. Now there are little pieces of it, and I could still go in with my Refine Edge tool and get it out of there. But look at this compared to what we got. I think I still have the old one open. Let's go back and look at the old one compared to that. So here, where it didn't know what to do at all with this, versus in the 2020 version, look at the difference. And again, that's with zero cleanup. That's just what Adobe Sensei gave me. Now I would still go around it one quick time with the Refine Edge tool, but it would be one time, as opposed to brushing, trying to get it all out, trying to get it all out, trying to get it all out. So this is huge for people that do compositing, for people that cut their photos, cut people out of a background and put them on a different background, because you're just simply going to be doing a whole lot less work than you would have done a month ago. All right, so let's zoom out. And again, now we can see the background behind her. She's on, by the way, and when you do that, it always puts it on its own layer with a mask. You could always go back and edit that mask. The original one is still there in the layers panel, so you didn't lose anything. It didn't delete anything. And you can, of course, go in with your move tool, move her around, and she is completely cut out from that original background. You can put her wherever you want to be. You can size her down. So if she didn't need to be that big, I can scale her down and make it look a little bit more realistic, more like a travel shot coming into that location. So big time saver just in that one feature alone. Now I'm going to turn that layer off. I'm going to go into just a different subject that I didn't use before, and we'll bring this guy in. And same thing now. A lot of people say, oh, you're using a photo with a white background. That makes it easy, blah, blah, blah. And believe it or not, a white background is not all that easy. It's easier than, let's say, a background that's the same color as the subject. But gray is really the easiest. And the reason why a white background is not as easy as some people think is because white is still going to reflect into the subject. It's going to bounce or reflect right onto the subject's hair. So if you are photographing someone with the intent to cut them out later, definitely don't use white. Use gray, because gray is a neutral color and therefore won't reflect, like the gray in my shirt, won't reflect onto the background. So if you got a choice, if you're setting this shoot up and you're saying, oh, I know I'm going to take this picture and composite them onto a different background later, use gray. Don't use white. Don't use green. Don't use yellow. Don't use any other color. Gray is going to be your friend, because it's all about contrast and also about not reflecting that color into the background. So in this case, this is a subject taken against a sunset or sunrise. I don't know, probably sunset. But it looks like it almost looks like a composite because there's a nice bright studio light on top of the person. So I don't know if they took a light outside and shot this person or not, or photographed this person or not. I don't know, but this is a stock image. This was not one of mine. But I'm going to go ahead and use the same technique. Let's go ahead and go to select subject. Again, it figures out what the subject is very nicely. And let's go ahead and go to select and mask. And again, look at the hair. Just look at what it's doing automatically or automagically with that Adobe Magic that's now a part of Sensei. And again, I still can go in and brush. I can still go in and fix things. But just clicking OK and not having to go in and fix things is going to always be my preferred method. I love having the choice. I love being able to go in and take care of it if I need to, but I also love not having to if I don't have to. So again, just taking a subject like this and with hair and being able to move them around, even though that part of the background didn't get masked. But there we go. And again, if I want to scale this person down, scale them down a bit, and look at that beautiful, beautiful mask that we got. Just simply with select subject and not having to do all the work that we used to have to do. Okay, so that's just a bit of a deeper dive. Now I have a trick. I have something that you're probably not expecting. All right, so you've seen me do this like 3 times already. Select subject, select and mask, click OK. So that's technically 2 to 3 steps at best. Let's hide this one. Let's turn this one off. Let's do I have a different person here? Oh, you know what? Let's use a different background. All right, we'll use a different background. And we'll bring her in again. All right, there she is on a different background, and away we go. Okay, so you know what the steps are. Select subject, select and mask, click OK, and you're done. If it doesn't need any more work. Well, you might remember I've shown a feature in the past that does all that in one step. It's called remove background. And remove background is technically doing those 2 steps for you. It's doing a select subject, it's doing a select and mask, or it's basically doing a mask. It's not doing a select and mask. It's just adding a mask to it. But that was only good if the subject could be selected well or selected good or perfectly with select subject. So it wasn't good if you were using a person with hair because the hair would not be selected. Well, now since the hair is getting selected, can we use the one-click button? Let's try it out. So I go to the Properties panel, and in the Properties panel on that layer, and let me make sure here, there we go. I want to, well, hang on, one more thing. Because this is linked, I can't do it. So let's go ahead and get rid of that link. Okay, now that I bring that object in, I have the ability to just do a one-click remove background. This has been here since last November, but it really wasn't as useful because if the person had hair, it really didn't work well. Well, now that we have the new portrait select subject, click remove background, and it does all that in one step. So it basically just did your select subject and did your select or your mask and created a new layer and done. Actually, it didn't even create a new layer, just masked the original. So there it is, with or without. And of course, we can hold down the Shift key to hide the mask whenever we want and bring the mask back on whenever we want. And you've got your one-click remove background. All right, so that's the tip for today. Remove background just got a lot more useful than it was back in November. All right, let's move on. We did the, let's do this. All right, let me go in. And I want to talk about one more thing in Camera Raw that I don't think I got a chance to really talk about. Let me go here. Actually, it's in here. And it should be in here. And there we are, raw files. All right, so I have several raw files here. That these are all DNGs, or they could be your native raw files. Doesn't matter. And you know that if you take more than one and you drag it onto the Photoshop icon, I want to make sure I do the new one. They'll open up in Camera Raw. But one of the biggest differences now is that the Camera Raw layout, not only on the right-hand side is more like Lightroom, but even the film strip is now at the bottom. Now, this is all configurable, whereas it didn't used to be before. So I can turn off or turn on the film strip as I need to. I can also click the little menu here and go to the film strip orientation. If you prefer it back on the left-hand side where it used to be, you can always go back to it. You may like that depending on how much room you have to work with. You can always go back and reconfigure that. You can also do a lot more things in this menu, such as your copy, edit settings, and paste them across multiple photos, set your ratings, mark for deletion. So again, this is like Camera Raw is becoming a lot more like Lightroom in terms of feature set and built in and having this stuff built right into Camera Raw. Show your ratings and color labels. Many of these options are brand new inside of Camera Raw. So just wanted to point those out as well. And of course, selecting multiple photos and applying your edits should apply them the same. Let's see, let me make sure. If I turn the vibrance down on all of those, turns the vibrance down on all of those. So you can quickly go in and edit a bunch of Camera Raw images just that easily without having to import them into Lightroom if you just had a bunch of raw images in a folder somewhere that you wanted to work with. All right, and of course, even if I don't open these in Photoshop, if I made any adjustments, so let's say I do bring up the vibrance on all of these. If I make any adjustments and just simply click done, those adjustments have been made non-destructively to those raw files. So they're either, because those are DNGs, the metadata got stored inside the file. That will happen with a DNG or with a JPEG, which JPEG wouldn't have opened in Camera Raw that way without you manually doing it. But for your raw files, if it's a native raw file like a Canon, Nikon, Sony, whatever, then it will put a sidecar file next to it containing the edits. All right, but in either case, the edits are non-destructible. All right, let's move on. So I'm going to switch over now, and this is one of the other big important things I want to point out. You'll notice that I have two Lightroom icons, and thank God they're now different, meaning that before 3 weeks ago, it just used to be LR and LR with rounded corners. And the difference was the LR that had the square corners was Lightroom Classic, and the LR with the rounded corners was the Lightroom newer cloud-based version. So now the Lightroom Classic version gets the C. So now if you're asking me a question and you say, hey, how do I do this in Lightroom? Unless you tell me specifically Classic or Lightroom C, I'm going to assume you mean the newer one. So just let's start getting our terminology together that if we mean Classic, we say Classic. If we don't, we mean the other versions of Lightroom, which could be on your desktop or on your mobile devices. So I'm going to switch to the newer cloud-based version, and you can call it Lightroom Cloud if you want. That's what we all do, just to also make that distinction. But the official name is just Lightroom, and the official name is Lightroom Classic. All right, so I'm going to switch over to Lightroom. And this Lightroom and Lightroom Classic got new features, but if I were to try and say like which one got the most this time, clearly Lightroom got more features because it is further behind. It needs more features. One of the biggest things that it got is something called versions. So what is a version? So let's say that I go into a photo here. Let's say I go into one from one of my daily walks here. Let's say I go into this one. And I go in and I start making some changes to it. Well, first and foremost, I want to rotate it because it's a little slightly crooked. Let's rotate it and fix that horizon just a bit. All right, we got that. And then maybe I go into my spot removal tool. It looks like a little piece of paper or something there on the ground, and I get rid of that. There's another little piece of paper or something on the ground there. I get rid of that. And now I go in and start making adjustments globally to the entire photo. So it's an HDR, so it already got the auto tone treatment, which is good. But maybe I want to go in and do something that auto tone doesn't do, like I want to add a little bit of dehaze to it. There we go, just kind of like, see how hazy a photo can be, especially shot in the middle of the morning, middle of the day, versus just adding a little dehaze to get rid of some of that atmospheric haze. Now I can do that, and I can also, since this is a landscape, I can go to town on the vibrance and color. Vibrance did get bumped up quite a bit. Originally it was that, and I can even bump it up more. Don't go too crazy, because even though it's pretty, even though people would actually buy that and put it on their walls, it's a little too much. Let's go back a little bit. All right, so now that we got that there. Hey, David. David, great to see you here. If you want to head over to b.net/Adobe Live, we'll actually be able to see any comments you're making. All right, and again, saturation. I typically don't use saturation on portraits, but I absolutely use saturation on landscapes. Okay, so now that I've made all these adjustments, as we know with Lightroom, it's all non-destructive, so I can always go back, undo, make the adjustments again. None of this is permanent. But what if I want to lock this version in time? Like, I like what I did with this. I always want to get back to this, but I want to go forward and play some more. So what I could do is create a version. That's brand new inside of Lightroom. Now, Lightroom Classic had this feature already, or has this feature already, but it's not called versions, it's called snapshots. And you might say, why didn't they just call it snapshots in this version, or in this version of the app? Because although the features may be the same when they introduce them in the newer version of Lightroom, they're not only adding the features and rethinking the workflow, but they're also rethinking the terminology. For example, in Lightroom Classic, we have collections. In Lightroom, we have albums. They're the same thing, but why is one called collections and one calls albums? Because everyone knows what a photo album is. Everyone doesn't really get what a collection is in terms of photos. So while collections is the term we know from over a decade ago, if you're attracting new users to the platform or new photographers or people that are just new to Lightroom, some of those terms just don't make sense as much as they could by changing the terminology. So whereas a snapshot, I know what that is in Lightroom Classic, a version makes more sense in terms of the name. So rather than screw up the names of Classic, they're just changing the names in the new version, because typically people are going to pick one version or the other, and that's what they're going to use. So if you're a Classic user, you're going to learn that terminology. If you're a Lightroom user, you're going to learn this terminology. But I do think this terminology for new users is easier. The other thing to think about, like for example, import photos is what Classic calls them, versus Lightroom, add photos. It's a subtle difference, but add photos sounds a lot more friendlier than import photos. What does that mean? And technically what's weird about it is you are adding photos to Lightroom Classic because you're not importing them into anything. You're just telling the catalog what to look at. Versus Lightroom Cloud version, you are importing the photos. You are importing them so they sync to the cloud, so forth and so on. So that one's kind of backwards. But add photos is more friendly. So that's why you'll see terminology that's the exact same thing in both programs be different. All right, so let's go into versions. So if I click on versions, I can create as many versions as I want. So here's the original. It already knows what the original is. It makes that one by default. And then there's the new one. Look at the big difference right there. That's what I started with. That was the original out of the camera photo. And then this is what we are now. So I can create a version that says, call it whatever I want. More vibrant, or I like it, or favorite, or whatever you want to call it. Now that you've got that version, you can then go in and do more edits. You can do more things. So I could say, you know what? I would love to see this. I would love to see this maybe with no saturation. Let me see what it would look like as a black and white. Oh, you know what? Better yet, instead of doing it that way, let's go up to our profiles and let's choose one of my favorite black and white profiles. Let's browse all profiles. Let's go to black and white. And again, these are all non-destructive, and I can kind of pick one that brings out the image the way I want. I kind of like this one for the clouds. That's kind of dramatic. Go down here, maybe pick one of these. Nah, I kind of like the one that was dramatic. That's pretty cool. So I can click that one and then create another version called, you guessed it, black and white. So now that I got that version, I can always go back to the original. I can go back to my more vibrant version. I can go back to my black and white version. I can go to any version I want and at any given time and do whatever I want. Continue editing it, export it, or just keep it that way. So that is one of the big new things inside of Lightroom. Now I'm going to switch back to me for a second. I just want to check one thing before I show it. And because it could be, depending on what's out there, it could be not a great thing. Let me see here. Okay, we're good. Just wanted to, I'm doing a safety check before I show this. All right, so let's say that you, hang on, let's switch back. Let's switch it back. There we go. Let's say that you like your more vibrant version. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to click on versions, and I'm going to go to my more vibrant version. And I now want to, okay. Now I want to share how I did this with anyone that wants to know. So in Lightroom, we have these, we call them edits. They're tutorials where you can watch a photographer's edit process through the photos. But those were curated, meaning that I could make one, I could share it with the team, they could put it in Lightroom so you could see it. In this version, we opened up what are called, I just already forgot the name. We call them Discover. So you can make these discovery tutorials. And if I go to, let's go to landscape. Let's go to landscape. I can click on one, and again, I'm just looking at these for the first time. So I can click on one of these, and it will walk me through what the person did step by step to get to their final photo. And that's great. That's a great way to learn, if you see a photo you like, how the person got there. But again, prior to this update, these were all curated. You couldn't do one. You would have to, you would have to be a photographer chosen by Adobe to be able to submit these. Well, now anyone can do these. So if I go back to my photos, and I go back to that vibrant version of the photo, and I want you to know what my settings are, I can go in and say, share, and I can go to share edit. So this is a brand new feature. It's in beta. Submit to Discover. And there's no approval process. There's nothing you have to do other than you have to at least make one adjustment to your photo in order for it to accept it. So I'm going to go ahead and select share edit. It's going to ask me some questions. So what's the title of this? Bringing out the clouds. Then I can give it a bit more description. Taking a photo with my iPhone and using the Lightroom camera and bringing out the vibrance and cloud detail. So put whatever your description is. So this is another big one. If I want, I can even make it so if you like the way I process this, I can enable save as preset. So when you look at mine, you can click save as preset and you will have a preset that you can apply to your photos that will do what I did. I don't want to include the photo's location so that's a nice choice. You can make it so it's private, meaning that wherever this was taken, people won't know, or you can make it public. I'm going to put this in landscape because that's what it is. There's really not a lot of nature there, but you can put in up to 3 categories. So I'm going to put in 1. It's got my copyright info already. I'm going to click share, and it is now submitting that edit to my gallery. So that's it. I can now copy the link to this edit, and I'm going to put this link right in the chat so you guys will have it. And you can check it out. There it is. And so you can also follow me on you can see my edit. So you can follow a photographer, and you can, of course, see all my social media links there. And you can go through any of my edits, and you can see the befores and afters and see what it took to get to those images. And I also have tutorials. These are the ones that are curated that, walk through a series of steps. But the discovery stuff, anyone can do. All right. I don't know why I ended up with 2 there. But anyway, my edit is ready. Share it live. All right. Can you tell the best editing software to view edited photos for photography? I'm not sure what that means. The best software to view edited photos for photography? Lightroom, Photoshop? I don't know what you're asking. All right. So anyway, let's go back. So now you have that preset that you can either go look at my edit or save the preset and apply it to your photos if you like. All right, next up, let's take a look at just one more quick thing. And this is actually something that I saw Christy Shirk, she's a Photoshop instructor, run into this because on your phone, when you share an album, You can make it so people can comment, they can heart, they can like photos, so forth and so on. But the activity of those likes and comments are in an activity panel on the phone, but not on the desktop for some reason. And they added that in this version. So if I click the activity panel, if this were a shared album, any likes or any comments on my photos, I could now easily see in one spot just by clicking the photo and seeing what the likes and comments were. All right, so that's new also in the Lightroom version is the ability to see your activity. All right, next up, we're going to switch gears. We're going to now head over to the iPad. So let's switch devices. There's my iPad running Lightroom already. I've just got Lightroom open. And we're going to do a couple of things. First thing we're going to do, I'm going to tap on this flower. And we're going to see another, a new kind of local adjustment. So a local adjustment typically was one of three things. It was the adjustment brush, it was the radial filter, the ellipse, or the graduated filter. So those three things have always been local adjustments inside of Lightroom. There's now a fourth. The fourth local adjustment is the hue adjustment. So if I were to go into, there we go. Let's go to my brush. Oh, no, wrong brush. Let's go into, there we go, local adjustment. And let's add a local adjustment. Tap the plus sign. So those are my three. My adjustment brush, my radial filter, and my graduated filter. Let's zoom in on this flower. Let's go to the brush. Let's use my Apple Pencil. And let's just simply start brushing. Now, you're seeing red because what it's really just showing me is my mask. That's showing me everywhere that I'm brushing on this flower to make sure I get it all. So I'm just brushing. I went a little over there. That's okay. I can go and hold down a key and subtract, or just go to the eraser and subtract to get it off of the edges there. All right, so now that I've made that adjustment, one of the new local adjustments, even though brush, radio, and graduated are the three main tools, you now have in color this hue adjustment. So the hue is really two parts of that widget. So there's the bottom bigger strip, the color strip, that's showing you where you are in the color spectrum. So it's showing me I'm right on the orange because that part of the flower is orange. The top skinnier bar is showing you if you drag that circle in either direction, that's the color you're going to get. So if I wanted that petal of the flower to be more blue or purple, I drag it to the left. So I can just simply drag it quickly to the left to make it more purple, and I can also see any spots I missed. Oh, I'm using the eraser, wrong tool. Undo. Go to the right tool. And put that back in. So now that, missed some more edges there. Now that all becomes purple, and of course I can keep going and making sure I got it all. And it's showing me the adjustment. Once you get in the area you want, you're kind of like you got, okay, I'm in the color that I want to be, but I want to make it more fine-tuned. Then you can go in and switch it to use fine adjustment. So when I use fine adjustment, when I turn that on, the circle you're dragging left or right, you can only move it a little bit. You can't move it a lot. So it's basically restricting your movement of that circle to a very small amount. So you can lock it in and get the exact color you want. So you can turn that on or off at any given time to be able to make a big adjustment or a small adjustment to get to the color you want. Looks like the flower has soaked up some purple. I see what you did there. All right, and again, if I want to change the color to something else, just move it. Change it to any color that I want it to be in the spectrum. All right, so if I like that color, then I can make it more of that color. So the local hue adjustment for any of your adjustments, not just the brush, use it for the radial filter, you could use it for the graduated filter. So if you want to change the color of a sky to something else, You could do that as well. That might be very interesting, by the way. I might have to try that right now. I got like 14 minutes left. Let's go do that. Let's get up, say done, get out of this photo, and I gotta try it. Let's do a graduated filter. Let's do it that way. Let's pull it down. Okay, there's my graduated filter. Let's go to color. And now that's showing me what the color of the sky. Oh yeah, baby. We can adjust the color of the sky, give it more saturation, and make the graduated filter where we want. So any local adjustment, you can now quickly and easily change the colors of things. All right, just keep that. I'm going to cancel that, but just keep those in mind. All right, the next, and this is huge. This is one of the most requested features for people that are trying to do things on iPad. So you're working in Lightroom on your iPad, you run into something that the Lightroom can't do. So you would typically, in the desktop, head to Photoshop. Well, we've got Photoshop on the iPad, and it's getting better and better with each update. So the problem was Photoshop on the iPad before 3 weeks ago couldn't open RAW files. And there was no workflow going from Lightroom on the iPad to Photoshop on the iPad, but now there is. So if I take this photo, and let's say I want to add, because I shot this for stock, so she's looking off to the side so people can add their marketing message. So if I wanted to do that kind of stuff, like add text, there's no way to do that in Lightroom. But now I can, of course, in Photoshop. But how do I get this RAW file over to, and this is a RAW file, right? Yep, that's a DNG. How do I get this RAW file over to Photoshop on the iPad? Well, I go to Share, and now for the first time, there is Edit in Photoshop. So I just tap Edit in Photoshop. That will render out a copy. It will render out a Photoshop file from my full resolution RAW file shot from my camera that was in Lightroom. And then it will open up Photoshop on the iPad and open up that PSD. So it's writing the PSD format, and it's taking a second because it is that was shot with my D850, I mean. So that is, I don't know, 40 megapixel files. It's huge. And there it is. Okay, so now we're in Photoshop on the iPad, and I can do whatever I would normally do. Add layers, make adjustments, crop, whatever I would do in Photoshop that I want, including adding text. But you'll notice that there is a button in the upper left corner once I'm done that says Send to Lightroom. In other words, send this edited PSD with all the layers back over to Lightroom and sync it so it'll even be available on your desktop to continue working. So one of the things I want to show off here, it's not totally new, but it is fairly new. Another big requested feature for Photoshop on the iPad was the ability to work with curves. So I'm not a huge curves user. I understand how curves work. I just find it easier to use other adjustments in Lightroom. But for people that want curves and have demanded curves be in Photoshop on the iPad, it is here. All right, so if I wanted to adjust the shadow area, I can pull that area up. If I want to pull down the highlights a little bit more, make it a little bit more dramatic, I'm just using my finger here to make these adjustments, and it's making those adjustments accordingly. So I can even pull down those highlights a little bit more and make it a little bit more of a less punchy photo just by adjusting my curves. So go to town. That's an adjustment layer. It's not permanent. You can turn it on, turn it off, and away we go. So now if I were to go to my type tool and I were to click and tap type there, I can go ahead and say that this is now hang on, my phone's in the way. A beautiful summer day. Now that is in the last font I was using, so I can say, here's simply Command A. I have a keyboard, so I just hit Command A on the keyboard to select all. I can first of all go to whatever color I want, make it whatever color I want in the spectrum, or I can even use the eyedropper and sample like the color in her clothes, or sample her skin tone, or sample anything in the background, sample her blue jeans, but I kind of like this white sweater shirt she's got on her top. All right, so now that's Zafino. I don't want that font. I can go in and make it whatever font I want. How about some good old Papyrus? Just kidding. Let's go in and let's make it I don't know. I can make it something simple. Baskerville. All right, Baskerville it is. Now we have font size. We have tracking and kerning. Tighten that up a little bit. We have leading. Bring that a little closer. And baseline shift, all the things that you would expect in type. Now, I'm running out of time, so I can spend more time designing that type, making a different color, so forth and so on. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to simply hit send back to Lightroom. So it's writing my PSD out. And Comic Sans, yeah, I knew that would come up. Writing my PSD out, then it'll switch back to Lightroom, and now Lightroom says at the very bottom, receiving document, Photoshop document received. So you'll notice that there's still the DNG, the original raw file that was still there, still unchanged. And then I have a Photoshop PSD file that has all the layers that I can either continue working on in Photoshop on the iPad or take it over to Photoshop on the desktop, because ultimately that is now syncing that PSD to the cloud, and therefore it'll be available on all my devices. All right, again, we can keep going, but for the sake of time, we've only got a few minutes left, and that's the perfect amount of time I need for the next things I want to show. Okay, next up, let's head over to Lightroom Classic, because I haven't talked about Lightroom Classic yet. Lightroom Classic did not get a bunch of new things that are on the surface, but it did get some new things under the hood. It got the thing that we always want in Lightroom Classic, and that is performance. So they keep making performance adjustments to make things faster. And although we don't pre-announce what we're going to do next, the team is pretty clear that the next thing that they're going to be working on is library grid scrolling and develop slider scrubbing speed improvements. But there is one major thing I do want to point out that is different or moved. Before you would go under your identity plate to get to all the syncing stuff, and now that stuff's gone. That stuff's not here anymore, because there's a brand new sync panel on the right. Oh, hang on. Not showing my desktop. There we go. There's a brand new sync panel on the right-hand side. So if I were to click the sync panel, that now shows me all the syncing activity. It shows me how much cloud storage I have. It shows me whatever syncing. If I want to get to my sync settings, the sync settings button is right here. So they just moved all the different things that were in maybe 2 or 3 different places into a sync panel in the upper right-hand corner, just like it is on the other version of Lightroom. So I showed under the identity panel and the identity plate, that stuff's been moved. None of that is over here anymore. It's all over here on the right-hand side. All right, that brings me to last but not least, and 6 minutes left. So let's talk about, I'm bringing up my phone. I've got my iPhone here, and let's talk about Photoshop Camera. So I'm going to hide this, hide others. And then I'm going to hide, oh, no, I didn't mean to do about. I meant to do hide. And let's go to QuickTime. There we go. And now we'll do hide others. There we go. All right, so now we'll bring QuickTime, or bring, not QuickTime, we'll bring my iPhone over. There's my iPhone, and of course I keep Lightroom right on the home screen, but I also have an Adobe folder, and in that Adobe folder is a new icon in the bottom left-hand corner called PSC, or Photoshop Camera. This is a brand new app. It was in beta for a while. It is now released for both iOS and Android. And if you press and hold on it, by the way, here's a shortcut. If you want to take a picture with Photoshop Camera, you can get to the camera right on the spot just by doing a hard press on iOS. But I'm going to go ahead and go into the app because I don't want to take a picture, even though it's going to bring up my camera first. Hey, there I am, portrait on a green screen, but that's not what I want. I'm going to go ahead and tap the Load an Existing Photo button over here on the right-hand side. And 3 weeks ago, I showed the Eiffel Tower that I shot in Paris way back when. But I'm going to load a different photo for today. I'm going to go in and hit, you can bring in things from your camera roll. You can take a picture right on the spot. But you can also, you see that Lightroom icon in the upper right-hand corner. So any albums that you have, or any collections you've synced from Lightroom Classic will be available. So I go to my Lightroom icon. Here are all my different albums and collections. And there's one that we took, I think, a year ago of the Adobe Evangelist team. So all the people that will be doing master classes today. There's Rufus, there's Howard, there's Jason. I took all these photos. There's Stephanie, there's Paul. And I took a couple of group shots. And so I'm going to open up one of these group shots. And let's go ahead and open it. And that's pulling it down from Lightroom in the cloud, opening it right up in Photoshop Camera. And it just did a quick pass of what it thought it needed to do. That's great. But what's really cool about Photoshop Camera, unlike Instagram or any other app where you have looks or filters that apply to the photo, Photoshop Camera is unlike anything else. While we don't call them filters, we call them lenses. Because what a lens is, it isn't just applying a look to a photo. It's actually applying layers and AI technology to adjust the photo. So for example, if I were to add a night scene behind us, well then we shouldn't be bright. We should look like we're at night. So it does intelligent things to not only the background, but also the foreground. So if I go to lenses, we have all these different categories that we're always adding to. So there's blue skies, there's Revere, there's Prism, Billie Eilish, Adobe Max, Eclectic, Color Echo, Mythos. I'm going to go into some of my favorites here. I'm going to scroll all the way over to, for example, Cosmos. So when I go to Cosmos, it did what I said. It basically made us darker, and you'll notice that I can now swipe between the different Cosmos. So I can say that one, I can say that one, and I can say this one. And it's basically what it's doing is it's also adding the background without me having to do any masking. It's figured that out. All right, so that's one. There's Water World, which again applies. There's a whale behind us now, jumping up out of the water. And you might say, okay, Terry, that's cute, but so what? Let's go back to Cosmos for a minute. And let's go to, let's see if I can find the one I want. Oh, maybe it's Fantasy Skies. Let's see. Yeah, that's cool. There we go. So you see that motion happening behind us, those thunderstorms or lightning storms happening behind us. That's all video that's happening behind us as well. So I can save this out as a video or as a still as needed. Now, when I go to Cosmos, maybe that's not the one I want. Hang on. I'm looking for a particular one. There we go. This is it. Night sky. So when I go to night sky, you'll notice the moon is behind us and is turning. Well, maybe I don't want it that big, or maybe I don't want it behind us that way. I'm going to pinch and zoom, and I'm pinching and moving that Photoshop layer behind me, because maybe I want to be the star of the show. So now I've made the moon, which is rotating in real time behind me, while it also, again, darkened the foreground, because if this were really the moon behind us, we would be darker at night. But let's say I don't want us to be that dark. I still have the ability to go in and make adjustments. There are my shadows, so I could bring my shadows out more. Oh, there we go. I have highlights, I have clarity, I have vibrance, I have exposure, which is what I want. So I can still bump up the exposure a bit and just brighten us up a little bit more. And once I'm done with this edit, I can then share it out as, in this case, I want to share it out as a video, because as a video, it would be, the moon would still be turning. So I can tap to play it, tap to bring it up. And I also have, nope, I don't want to try Photoshop Express. Save my changes. And then I also have the ability at any time to download it and save it to the camera roll. I can even choose what format to save it in. So I'll save it down to the camera roll. And now I have a video to post on Instagram that is unlike any other video that the moon doesn't spin. Well, the Earth's, okay, yeah, you're right. The moon doesn't spin, but it does in Photoshop Camera. All right. And there we go. So it's photo projected on domes. Okay. I'm not sure what that means, Sean. So that is it. I am out of time. So I hope that you got something out of my deeper dive into some of these apps. Check out Photoshop Camera. Go play. You don't have to have the moon spinning. You can try some of the other things. And I think you'll have some fun with it. Thunderstorms and lightning, very, very frightening. Yeah, especially to my dog. Lisa does not like those things at all. Okay, guys, that's it for me today. I'll be back next week for more things. You can always suggest topics as well. You guys stay safe and stay well. And up next is the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. And I can't remember who's doing it. I think Paul might be doing it today. But stay tuned for more Photoshop, and cheers, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.